19 years ago, I pulled a shivering, runaway girl out of a gas station, bathroom at 2 in the morning, and told her she could stay as long as she needed. 19 years later, my husband's own family stood up in a courtroom and called me a con artist who married an old man for his orchard. I'm Diane Marsh, and this is the night everything I built almost got taken from me by the people who shared his blood, and the night it was saved by a girl who shared nothing with him at all except a kitchen table and a promise. If stories about quiet, loyalty finally getting its day in court are the kind that keep you up late scrolling, hit subscribe now, because you're going to want to be here for this one. The rain was coming down sideways the night I found her. I was 34, married 8 years to Walter Marsh, a man 22 years older than me, who ran 40 acres of apple, trees his grandfather had planted, and I was driving home from a late shift at the diner because that's what you did in our town before the orchard ever made real money. I stopped for gas outside of Millbrook and heard crying coming from the women's bathroom. The kind of crying somebody tries hard to swallow so no stranger will hear it. She was maybe 15, sitting on the tile floor with a busted lip and a backpack that had seen better decades. She told me her name was Sadie and nothing else. Not where she'd come from, not who'd put that bruise on her face. I didn't push. I'd learned a long time ago that scared people tell you the truth on their own schedule, never on yours. I called it in the right way. Through the sheriff, through the county, nothing done in the dark. But I didn't leave her sitting on that floor while the wheels of paperwork turned. I bought her a coffee and a blanket from my truck, and I sat with her until sunrise. And somewhere around 4 in the morning, she asked me the only question that mattered. She asked, "Are you going to disappear like everybody else does?" I knew that question. I'd asked it myself once, a long time ago, of people who never answered it right. So I looked her in the eye and told her the truth, which was that I didn't know what came next. But I knew I wasn't leaving that parking lot without her having somewhere safe to land. Walter didn't blink when I brought her home. He just set another plate at the table like he'd been expecting company all along. Over the months that followed, through the interviews and the home studies in every form the county could invent, Sadie became ours not by blood, but by every choice that actually counts. On the day it was finalized, Walter took her out to the orchard, put a key to the tool shed in her hand, and told her, "In this family, nobody gets left standing in the rain." That sentence became the whole shape of our house. Time did what it does. Walter kept grafting new rootstock onto old trees, the same patient way his grandfather had taught him, and at night, at our kitchen table, he'd talk through the business side with anyone willing to listen, which for years was mostly me, and once she was old enough. Sadie. She grew up reading contract law paperback books. She got secondhand from the library sale, asking Walter why the small orchards around us kept losing their land to the big co-op buyers the moment they didn't understand a lease clause. Walter didn't have a clean answer, but he gave her the true one. "Never sign a thing," he told her, "that you haven't read to the very last word." She decided somewhere in high school that she wanted to be a lawyer, and when the tuition bills came, Walter sold off a parcel of the orchard's oldest trees to cover the first year, even though the business needed every dollar that season. He never once treated it like a debt she owed us. He treated it like a promise he intended to keep. Marsh orchards grew slow and then fast, the way these things do, until it wasn't just 40 acres anymore. It was 600 acres, a cidery, a distribution deal with 3 states, and a name people around here said the way you'd say something you trusted. Walter still wore the same canvas, barn coat to board meetings, that he wore to prune trees at dawn, to the seasonal crews who picked our fruit every fall, that made him a man worth working for, to his younger brother Gordon, who'd joined the board once the money got serious. It made him an embarrassment. Gordon had spent his whole life 2 steps behind Walter and had never once forgiven him for it. When Walter's heart started giving him trouble 2 years ago, Gordon saw an opening he'd apparently been waiting decades for. He partnered quietly with a regional agribusiness firm run by a woman named Pauline Ashcroft, and together they built a plan to prove that I had spent years manipulating a sick old man into signing his company toward me and away from his own blood family. Gordon's lawsuit, filed the week after Walter's funeral, claimed I had used undue influence to have Walter transfer controlling shares of Marsh Orchards into a trust bearing Sadie's name, a girl with no blood relation to Walter at all. The filing painted it exactly the way Gordon wanted it painted. An aging man weakened by illness, a much younger wife, and a stranger's daughter walking away with an inheritance that should have stayed in the family. The The story hit the local paper within days, and overnight, people who used to wave at me in the grocery store started looking at the produce instead. What cut deepest wasn't the threat to the business. I'd been poor before Walter, and I knew I could survive it again. What cut deepest was watching them turn the one true thing Walter and I ever did, taking in a frightened kid nobody else wanted, into evidence of a con. 3 days before the hearing, a courier delivered the summons that made the timeline brutal. 72 hours, and a judge would decide whether the trust, holding controlling interest in Marsh Orchards, was fraudulent, and whether I'd lose the business. Walter and I had spent our whole marriage building. Everyone who cared about me went looking for Sadie, now a working attorney 2 states over, specializing in exactly the kind of trust and estate law this case turned on. She was by any measure the one person alive equipped to stand in that courtroom and fight for me. But when I needed her most, she didn't answer her phone. Her office said she was traveling. Her apartment sat dark, and the silence bred exactly the kind of doubt Gordon was hoping for. Had she chosen her career over the woman who raised her? Had Pauline Ashcroft's money reached her first? Gordon fed the silence straight to the local press, telling anyone who'd listen that even Walter's adopted daughter wouldn't show up to defend his widow. And didn't that tell you something? I didn't believe it. Not because I was certain, but because certainty wasn't the point anymore. Some nights you just have to trust the thing you built, even when it's gone quiet on you. What none of us in Millbrook knew was that Sadie hadn't vanished out of fear. She was 3 states away in the dusty back office of Walter's old estate attorney, hunting for the original founding documents of the trust Gordon claimed was fraud. And in a records box marked in Walter's own handwriting, she found something that changed the whole shape of the fight. The trust wasn't a scheme to hand her a windfall. It was a firewall Walter had built years earlier, specifically to stop anyone from ever selling the orchard out from under the people who worked it. Should he become too sick or too old to stop them himself? The hearing opened in the county courthouse on a gray Tuesday morning, and I sat at the defense table beside a lawyer who'd inherited my case a week earlier and didn't fully understand it. Across the aisle, Gordon's legal team, led by a sharp litigator named Preston Kell, laid out photographs of Walter Frail in his last year, the trust paperwork, and finally, Sadie's adoption records blown up on a screen for the whole room to see. Kell painted the picture plainly. A sick old man, a scheming young wife, and a stranger's daughter walking off with the family fortune. He asked me directly in front of a packed gallery whether Walter had set up a trust in Sadie's name. I said yes. A murmur ran through the room like current through wire, and outside, the story was already moving across every local feed, framing it as a confession. My lawyer rose to argue the trust was lawful, but without the original founding terms in hand, it came out thin, and I watched the judge's face stay unmoved. The room had turned hard against us, and the machine of the law was grinding slowly toward freezing my control of everything Walter and I had built. Then, right as the judge lifted her pen to sign the order, the doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Sadie walked in wearing a dark tailored suit, an old leather folder under her arm, and she didn't rush, and she didn't apologize for the interruption. She walked straight to the clerk's table and said, "Clear and even, Sadie Marsh, counsel of record for the defense. I move to submit emergency evidence." The whole room went still. I turned in my seat, and for one suspended second, I didn't see a lawyer at all. I saw a 15-year-old on a gas station floor asking if I'd disappear like everyone else. She didn't let that moment soften her posture. She stood straight, waited for the court, and when Kell objected that she carried an obvious conflict of interest, she answered without heat that since the plaintiffs had made her identity the very center of their accusation, she had every right to appear, as both a witness to the truth of that trust and as counsel on its terms. The judge allowed it. Sadie opened the folder and laid out the original Marsh Family Protective Trust, drafted years before Walter ever got sick, and walked the court through language that proved the opposite of everything Gordon claimed. Walter hadn't moved company control to Sadie to enrich her. He'd built a wall, naming her as trust protector, specifically so that if anyone ever tried to force a sale of the orchard, through manufactured pressure on him or on me, voting authority would pass to someone with no financial stake in seeing it sold. The fund wasn't theft. It was a safeguard against exactly what Gordon was doing right now. She read a letter Walter had written and formally attached to the trust. The day her adoption was finalized, a letter that said he'd lost people before and wouldn't stand by while anyone in his family, blood or not, was left out in the rain. and that if the board ever weaponized Sadie's past against this family, that act itself would trigger the trust's protections. Kel scrambled, claiming the clause had lapsed. Sadie produced the annual renewal filings, each one submitted on time, every year, by Walter's longtime accountant, Miriam Voss, who took the stand and confirmed under oath that Gordon had known about these filings for years and had deliberately kept them from the rest of the board so no one would remember, when his lawsuit landed, that Walter had done everything in the open. Then Sadie went from defending to attacking. She entered a chain of messages between Gordon and Pauline Ashcroft, in which Gordon agreed to drive down the value of Marsh Orchards through legal pressure before Ashcroft's firm made its acquisition offer, calling Walter the old man with the charity habit and calling me the wife who'll cave once the money's threatened. Kel argued the messages were doctored. Sadie was ready, entering the forensic verification and metadata before he'd finished the sentence. Then came the payment, a transfer from a shell account tied to Ashcroft's firm into a consulting account under Gordon's name, dated the exact same day he filed the lawsuit. The judge asked Gordon to explain it. He had nothing that wouldn't convict him. Pauline Ashcroft tried one last cruelty. She had her counsel turn the questioning on Sadie herself, dragging out every hard year of her childhood in front of the gallery, painting her as a woman too buried in gratitude to be trusted as objective. Sadie didn't flinch. She said plainly that yes, Walter had given her a home, a name, and a future, and she'd never pretend otherwise. But she said a debt is something you repay to be free of it, and a promise is something you keep because of who you've chosen to be. She hadn't come to that courtroom to repay a debt. She'd come because the documents were true. Then she played the recording. Ashcroft had reached out to Sadie before the hearing, offering her a partnership at a New York firm on one condition, that she simply not show up. The recording, lawfully made, laid the whole plot bare in one sentence. "We don't need you to betray her. We only need you to stay quiet." That was why she'd vanished. Not to abandon me, to get past people who'd have crushed her the moment they saw her coming. The judge froze Ashcroft's acquisition on the spot, removed Gordon from the board pending investigation, and recognized Sadie as protector of the trust for the duration. Gordon's polished reputation came apart in the space of one afternoon. In the hallway after, Sadie and I didn't need a big scene. I told her I thought she'd gone. She said, "I learned from you. When somebody builds a trap in front of the door, you find the way in, from the back." Then she said the thing that closed the whole circle for me. "You never let anyone in this family stand alone in the rain. I wasn't going to be the one who let it happen to you." These days, the orchard still runs the way Walter built it. Slow, honest, patient with the trees the same way he was patient with people. Sadie handles the trust's legal side now, not as family decoration, but because she's the one person who's proven she'll defend it from anyone who mistakes a promise for a weakness. So here's what I'd ask you before you go. If somebody in your life took you in when nobody else would, when's the last time you told them it changed everything? And if you're the one who did the taking in, do you know yet how far that choice might travel? And what it might come back to save? Years down the road when you least expect to need it.